Back in 2001, my brother and I purchased an Xbox, and with it, Halo Combat Evolved. We must have played through that game over 100 times together, maybe more. The promise of that powerful, for its time hardware was showcased with huge levels that seemingly offered the freedom to go almost anywhere. Now, a full 20 years later, with hardware that I could have never dreamed of back then, those promises of sci-fi grandeur have not only been fulfilled, but have surpassed my wildest expectations. It has been 6 long years since Halo 5 was released, and after a 13-month delay from its initial announced launch date, I am happy to say that this is, by far, the best the series has ever been, both in moment-to-moment gameplay and from a storytelling perspective. Please allow me to explain why in the XboxEra review of Halo Infinite's campaign. Xbox now own a number of the world's biggest gaming IPs, but there is no series that makes people think Xbox more than Halo. It is the main reason I have owned every Xbox console, and a bit embarrassingly, is by far my most read collection of books. With a TV show launching in 2022, Halo has been Xbox's biggest transmedia IP that originated, following the acquisition of Bungie prior to the launch of the original Xbox, and has stayed fully within Microsoft's ever-shifting ecosystem. There was a disconnect, though, between that world-building lore and depth found in the novels versus the campaigns that Bungie created in the first 5 games of the franchise. Since 343 Industries was created and took the reins, they have attempted to bridge that gap and fill their titles with references and nods you can only fully appreciate by immersing yourself in the additional fiction available, be it books or graphic novels. Thankfully, Halo Infinite avoids the misfires of Halo 4, which featured an incredible backstory that you really did need to read elsewhere to understand the game's antagonist, the Didact, and Halo 5, which went too far in the other direction and hilariously killed off the Didact in a comic book before Halo 5 was even released. Between Halo Wars 2 and a few novels that have been released recently, you can absolutely gain a greater appreciation and understanding for the new big bad threat, the Banished, but it's not necessary at all to enjoy this proper ending to 343's initial Halo trilogy. Despite an 18-month time jump from the ending of Halo 5, this game is 100% a sequel to that title. All the questions you may have had after Halo 5 are answered here, with writing that far exceeds that standard of the series, and for gaming as a whole. I cannot overstate just how good the actors do here with the excellent dialogue they've been given. Even knowing some of the major plot beats thanks to datamine spoilers, I was floored to watch how well it all played out. Jen Taylor's three-headed role as Cortana, Dr. Halsey, and the Weapon is also some of the finest work this series has ever seen. Steve Downes' Chief is still stoic and rarely talkative, but he's much more the Chief from the books, with a dry sense of humor and, for the first time, serious cracks in his emotional armor. The events of Halo 4 and 5 have weighed heavily on John 117, and his respect for his fellow soldiers and life in general is beautifully displayed. The brute Escharum is the main antagonist, and Darren DePaul is his usual impeccable self, voicing the most satisfying and fully fleshed out villain the series has offered up yet. He somehow matches the menace and brilliance that Atriox displayed in Halo Wars 2, which was something I had been a bit concerned about with the lead up to release. Being a soldier is all Chief has ever known, and whenever he comes across a fallen Spartan, his sense of loss is palpable thanks to the incredible animation work. Blue Team is not here, and Team Osiris is never mentioned as far as I could tell. This is 100% a Master Chief story, and the heart of it is his failure to save Cortana from the dark path that she walked in Halo 5. As previously mentioned, Halo Infinite does start a full 18 months on from the ending of Halo 5, and it kicks off in serious style with everything going wrong. The UNSC has lost to the Banished 6 months prior, and the newest character, featured heavily in previous trailers, is the Pilot, who finds Master Chief floating in space. He claims the Banished have won, and he is desperate to leave and get as far away from them as possible. Chief, being who he is though, wakes up from his 6-month-long space nap and immediately starts tearing apart the Banished's operations on Zeta Halo. This is the mysterious ring featured in the Forerunner trilogy books that were published before Halo 4 was released. You don't need to know that to be able to fully enjoy this story, it just adds flavor for those of us that do. Cortana has chosen to make this her base of operations, and both the UNSC and the Banished are on the surface trying to stop her, though never while working together. I did do a short video on just who the Banished are earlier this year, which I'll link in the description below, in case you have no idea who these war-hungry monkey maniacs are. Very early on in the campaign, Chief recovers the Weapon, an AI that was designed to contain Cortana so that the UNSC could delete her once and for all. Chief, the Weapon, and the Pilot team up together as they desperately try to figure out what happened to Cortana while stopping the Banished from completing whatever their plans are on Zeta Halo and saving every UNSC member they can locate along the way. The cutscene camera movements, while a bit stuttery at times, are smartly crafted and add a real sense of quality to the game that permeates every single aspect of it. The 13-month delay appears to have been worth it, as this is a highly polished title with no area shining more brightly than the gameplay itself. 343's Halo games have generally faltered in one area. Halo 4 had that solid story and good gameplay, but the multiplayer was weak. Halo 5 had great gameplay and a weak story, but excellent multiplayer. Halo Infinite finally gets it all right, as the early release multiplayer has been fantastic, and the campaign nails that classic Halo gameplay better than any game has ever done before for me. By far the biggest and most successful new addition is the grapple shot. Not a hook, because you shoot this thing into targets like a maniac. 343 nailed the physics and feel of it, as many of you will already know from the multiplayer. From a campaign perspective though, having it on hand at all time is a game changer. Coupled with upgrades which result in a very short cooldown, it becomes a masterstroke of game design, making world traversal an absolute delight as you poke and prod into the sandbox and discover just what's possible. Indeed, this is the furthest away from the floaty tank feeling of Bungie's classics that things have ever been, yet it still retains the heart of what makes Halo so incredible to actually play. Much discussion has been had on the nature of this more open Halo. Is it as open world as it may seem? And the answer is multifaceted. But in a nutshell, it is as open as you, the player, want it to be. It can be tough to describe, but creatively Joe Staten has been adamant that this is not an open world game in the sense that people generally think of, and I have to agree with him. There is so much more of a focus here that lets you choose exactly how you want to play, and for me that meant doing every side activity I could before touching the next main mission. For others, it could mean playing the widest yet still linear Halo campaign yet. The best part of this is that you get to decide just how deep you want to go. Halo has dabbled with various equipment setups before, starting with Halo 3, Reach, and 4. Halo 5 attempted to put these power-ups as innate abilities, and the campaign felt great thanks to that new toolkit. Halo Infinite does away with a few moves while adding in 3 new ones. Gone are the Ground Pound, Spartan Charge, and Aim Down Sights Hover of Halo 5, and instead, we gain the aforementioned Grapple Shot, the new Threat Sensor, Drop Wall, and returning Thruster ability. A first for the series is an upgrade tree that operates on a new in-game resource known as Spartan Cores. These are located throughout the map in crates that either show up when you use the scanning pulse, which is down on the D-pad by default, or if you capture a forward operating base, and more on that in a little bit. I played through the game in my review run on heroic difficulty and found that focusing on the upgrades gave me a big advantage in the tougher fights over others who were playing early. One colleague I spoke with had serious trouble with a later stage boss, and there are many bosses, but we'll get into that in a bit, that I was able to take out quickly on my first try. The key difference wasn't player skill, instead it was the fact that I had fully upgraded all 5 ability slots. Your shield strength is that 5th slot that I hadn't mentioned yet, and with how hard enemies hit, it was the first one that I actually maxed out. Each ability gains things like strength or cooldown reduction, and also unique perks, such as your grapple shot stunning enemies you hit with it through a jolt of electricity. Electricity joins kinetic, plasma, hard light, and heavy as new ammo types, with a few new guns and the new dynamo grenade, helping you chain damage and stun lock vehicles to your heart's content. And those ammo types do matter now, as littered throughout each level in the open world are ammo refill stations that match each type. Another new addition to the series is the fact that plasma weapons are now replenished simply by walking over them, and you no longer have to do the plasma weapon dance where you're constantly discarding one that's at 80% charge if you find the same gun at 85%. It's a welcome change and one that was long overdue. We've seen all but one of the campaign's guns through the multiplayer. The scrap cannon makes its debut here after being shown in detail on an Inside Infinite blog post earlier in 2021. The Banished love their big, heavy, molten chunks of metal hitting you in the face, and this is the deadliest version of that yet. Many classics return, and are joined by both entirely new and reimagined versions of older weapons in by far my favorite choice of weapons yet in a Halo title. Vehicle-wise, things are a bit limited in comparison to something like Halo 3, but everything, outside of actually driving the Brute Chopper, feels both incredibly powerful and well-balanced. Also, your grapple shot isn't just for maneuvering, as you can also pull weapons and fusion coils, which are big glowy things that come in 3 explodey varieties, which were actually key for me taking down some of the tougher enemies as the game went along. As mentioned previously, new to the series are named bosses, who feature health and shield bars. If that concept concerns you, don't worry. Every single one of these was fun to fight, which I thought was an impossible task for a Halo title. The series had tried bosses before, but rarely with much success. The fact that they nailed the various types here is a testament to how well designed this game is, with these named foes having distinct movesets and capabilities. Thankfully, there is a new way to get weapons and vehicles as well to prepare for some of these encounters. FOBs, or Forward Operating Bases, litter the map, and according to a stream on the day of my writing, were added in during the last year of development per Joe Staten. You are tasked with taking out the Banished that guard them, which starts nice and easy, and by the end can be downright impossible. Once you do though, the base is yours, and you can use it as both a fast travel and call-in hub. Call-in what, exactly? Well, any weapons or vehicles that you've unlocked. To unlock these things though, there are 2 systems at play. The first is known as Valor. This is an experience bar you fill up as you do any and every type of objective on the map, and by the end of my playthrough, I had unlocked all but the last few items in it. The other way is to defeat HVTs, or high-value targets, on the map. These become available as you secure each FOB. Those HVTs are carrying weapon variants, which are similar to the Rec System weapons of Halo 5, though not as exotic. Through the Valor and HVT systems, you will eventually unlock variants for every, if not close to every, gun in the main game, outside of the carryable turrets. Some of these are ridiculously powerful, but that is balanced by them having lower than average ammo reserves. It's a really fun wrinkle added into things, and there are some incredible looking weapons and vehicles that are also tied directly to the main game bosses that add even more to the fun. There are other mission types as well that litter your tactical map, or TAC map, such as key Banished facilities, which all feel custom made, though they do follow similar patterns. This is what I would call a focused open world, and I never felt like I was getting that classic Ubisoft cut and paste treatment that was adorning their games for a while. Even things that were mostly similar in setup were greatly aided by just how varied your gameplay options are and how incredible it always feels to play. This really is the best feeling first-person shooter of all time, at least on console, and after completing it all, I just wanted to go back and start up another run immediately on Legendary. I would wager to say that one of, if not the most iconic things in the history of the Xbox platform is the music of the Halo series. Every title has had its unique take on things, but the classic monk chant still sends a shiver up my spine every now and then. To tackle by far the biggest and longest campaign yet, 343 has enlisted the help of 3 brilliant composers. Gareth Coker of Ori and Immortals fame, Curtis Schweitzer, whose work on Starbound is one of my favorites, and Joe Korlitz, who had worked previously on titles such as Gorogoa and Death Stranding. Here they all contributed to something very special. They hit upon what makes Halo music so familiar, but much like the gameplay, it is taken in new directions and brought to incredible heights. I found myself sitting at the main menu screen or hiding to the side during a fight just so that I could keep listening to the score. The best music in the world can't save bad dialogue, though, a problem that really plagued parts of Halo 5. Thankfully, the writing in Halo Infinite is, in my opinion, some of the best written and acted I've seen in a video game. I was stunned at how well acted Chief, Cortana, the pilot, the weapon, Esherim, just everything was, really. Master Chief has always been a man who chooses his words wisely. But Halo fans definitely have some surprises in store here, and he finally felt real to me in this game. His persona from the books was rarely ever matched by his video game counterpart, and seeing it finally happen has been a very nerdy dream come true. The sound effects in the game are incredibly punchy, with various states depending on the distance you are away from the source. It was actually a bit jarring, going from the more muted multiplayer mode into a Dolby Atmos enabled headset, but the work the audio team did is another thing that is as good as anyone else in the business, and perhaps the best I've ever heard overall. There has also been a lot of concern around Halo Infinite. Following the delay, there was a lot of commentary and speculation about just what kind of a state the game was in. As we found out, it was actually fully playable at the time of delay, but between adding a few things and tightening up some key areas, they had a lot of time to polish it up. And at least for my playthrough, it seems to have paid off wonderfully. I had 0 major bugs outside of one that was listed in the review guide, and it isn't something most people would ever do in-game, which was fast traveling while dead, which can force you to have to close the game and load it back up to your previous checkpoint. I had one instance of a Marine spawning with one of the 4 weapon lockers, and I had no graphical issues either. This is a very pretty game, and performance on my Series X on a variable refresh rate enabled display felt pristine in both the 4K 60fps and lower resolution 120Hz performance mode. For the video footage here, I captured it all in quality mode, but the majority of my playthrough ended up being in the 120Hz performance mode, which felt incredible. Without VRR though, I wouldn't recommend it as the frame rate is rather inconsistent. But if you have an HDMI 2.1 VRR capable display that isn't a very large OLED TV, then it is the way to play. If you do have a gigantic television though, the 4K 60fps Dolby Vision enabled HDR mode is the way to play it. The elephant in the room though is the lack of co-op at launch, with no clear date of when it's coming in the future outside of a nebulous Season 2, which is starting in May of 2022. Like everyone else, I was extremely sad when they announced its delay, but after experiencing this campaign, I get it. This is nothing like all 7 of the other mainline entries, and figuring out the best way to implement co-op deserves whatever time it needs because this game is enormous. I can beat Halo 1 to 5 in roughly 3 to 6 hours each on solo heroic. This game took me just around 18 hours, and that was with me ignoring the majority of the collectibles, as the campaign progress for this review build will not carry over into the retail version of the game. I really do hope that they implement co-op soon, but for now, it's mainly just me worrying that they find a better way to do it than something like Far Cry, which only allows for host progress, or the desync issues something like State of Decay 2 had at launch. One complaint people have had about the multiplayer side of the game is the lack of built-in customization options, and I'm happy to report that there is a very large number of multiplayer cosmetics to be found on Zeta Halo during the campaign in what are titled Mjolnir Lockers. These litter the campaign map and will unlock various items for your multiplayer Spartan once you open them up in the campaign. In conclusion, as you may have noticed, I don't have any major negatives for this game. Looking back over the years I've been playing Halo, all 20 of them, this is the dream Halo game that I always wanted. Let me explore the ring, solving mysteries and discovering new ones, with that signature gunplay and vehicular freedom that Halo is famous for, with an extensive world to discover, one Mjolnir boot in front of the other. 343 have taken the extra time given to them to craft something special. This is the start of a journey that should take us through the entire generation, and for me, this is the best starting point imaginable. It's an epic campaign that is everything true fans of the series have wanted since our nostalgia-driven brains started to really appreciate just how cool a level like the Silent Cartographer or Two Betrayals could be with modern technology. In a year packed with subpar launches for some of the biggest first-person shooter franchises, it feels really good to simply say this: Halo is back. I, for one, welcome the return of the king. Thank you so much for watching, and if you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow. And we'll see you here next time on XboxEra.